Vasilisa's story lasts because it feels like a fairy tale that still remembers pain. It is a story of exile, fear, instruction, and the strange kind of strength that appears when a girl is forced to survive the dark on her own. The tale belongs to the Slavic world of forests, villages, hearth fires, and old rules that were never written down in one place. In that world, the forest is not scenery. It is a living boundary between safety and danger. Vasilisa often begins with loss. Her mother is gone, and with that loss the story introduces its central object, a small doll that becomes a hidden source of guidance, memory, and inheritance. That doll matters because fairy tales often compress wisdom into a symbol. Instead of giving the heroine an army or a palace, the story gives her something tiny enough to hide but strong enough to matter. The stepmother and the difficult household create the first trial. This is a common fairy tale pressure point. The home becomes unstable before the true journey even begins, and the child is pushed into moral testing. When the stepmother sends Vasilisa into the forest, the tale moves from domestic cruelty into mythic danger. The forest is where children are separated from comfort and forced to discover what they actually know. That journey leads to Baba Yaga, one of the most unforgettable figures in world folklore. She is not just a witch. She is a gatekeeper, a test, and a force that punishes weakness while rewarding cleverness. Baba Yaga's house is iconic because it looks alive. That image helps explain why the tale travels so well. It is strange, memorable, and difficult to forget. The encounter is a test of etiquette as much as courage. In folk tales, survival often depends on saying the right thing, obeying the right ritual, and understanding what kind of power you are dealing with. Vasilisa succeeds because she listens. Her doll whispers guidance, and that guidance turns obedience into strategy. The story is teaching that survival is not the same thing as passivity. Baba Yaga gives impossible tasks, as folklore often does. The heroine must sort, clean, prepare, and endure, which turns labor into a moral trial and reveals who can remain calm under pressure. That pattern appears in many tales because the hero is not usually rewarded for talent alone. The real reward comes from persistence, discipline, and the ability to stay intelligent while frightened. The story also carries an older memory of feminine labor. Sewing, sweeping, cooking, and tending fire are not trivial details. They are the practical skills that make survival visible in a domestic world. The hearth itself is central. In Slavic storytelling, fire is comfort, but it is also judgment and memory. A hearth can warm a family or expose a lie, depending on who is standing near it. Vasilisa's doll becomes a miniature ancestor, a portable blessing that stands in for the mother who cannot be present. That emotional detail is why the tale lands so strongly even now. The story is also a warning about cruelty inside the home. Fairy tales are rarely just about monsters in the woods. Sometimes the first monster is the everyday household arrangement that makes a child vulnerable. That is part of why these tales survive. They do not flatter childhood. They show that fear can be ordinary, and that growing up often means learning to move through fear without losing yourself. Baba Yaga can be read in many ways, as threat, as teacher, as ancient memory, or as the wild intelligence of the forest itself. The story never fully resolves her, and that ambiguity is part of her power. Vasilisa's success does not come from defeating Baba Yaga in a battle. It comes from passing through the test and emerging with knowledge, which is the quieter and more realistic kind of victory. When she returns, the story transforms her. She is no longer the frightened child at the beginning. She has become someone who understands rules, power, and the hidden cost of surviving them. That transformation is the emotional engine of the tale. The fairy tale is not telling us that pain disappears. It is telling us that pain can be converted into maturity, memory, and authority. The villainy of the step family matters because it frames the world as morally uneven. In stories like this, the heroine does not discover virtue in a vacuum. She discovers it under pressure. Folklore works because it compresses social truth into one unforgettable path. A village, a forest, a witch, a task, and a return can carry centuries of cultural memory in just a few scenes. A responsible reading starts with the source trail. Vasilisa belongs to Russian wonder tale tradition, but the version most viewers know was shaped through collection, publication, translation, and illustration, not through a single fixed ancient script. Baba Yaga also should not be flattened into a simple villain. In Slavic folklore she can be terrifying, testing, helpful, cannibalistic, maternal, or judicial depending on the tale. That instability is part of her power. The doll is more than a magical object. It carries memory, discipline, and maternal instruction after the mother is gone. The tale turns grief into a portable guide. The skull light ending is just as important. Fire in the story is not only rescue, it is judgment. The light Vasilisa brings home exposes cruelty instead of pretending the household can simply return to normal. That is where modern retellings can go wrong. If the story becomes only a witch aesthetic, it loses the harsher structure: obedience, labor, danger, memory, judgment, and survival. The source trail matters because Vasilisa is not a single fixed ancient record. The version most viewers know passes through 19th century Russian collections, especially the world of Alexander Afanasiev, where oral tradition, literary shaping, and printed memory meet. That means the best label is not documented history. It is literary tradition built from folklore, a wonder tale that preserves social fears, household rules, and symbolic tests without asking us to treat every event as a literal report. Folklorists compare tales like this by patterns: the lost child, the hostile household, the dangerous helper, the impossible task, and the return with transformed status. Vasilisa feels unique, but it also belongs to a larger grammar of storytelling. Baba Yaga changes from tale to tale. Sometimes she devours, sometimes she tests, sometimes she gives a horse, fire, or secret knowledge. Reducing her to one witch image makes the tradition smaller than it really is. The chores are not filler. Sorting grain, tending fire, and keeping order turn domestic labor into initiation. The tale takes work that is often invisible and makes it the place where survival intelligence becomes visible. The skull fire is one of the tale's sharpest images because it refuses to be cozy. It saves Vasilisa, but it also burns through the false safety of the household. Rescue and judgment arrive in the same light. The story also sits near a boundary between household blessing and older forest fear. The mother's gift feels protective and intimate, while Baba Yaga's world feels older, stranger, and harder to classify. Modern versions often keep the aesthetic and lose the discipline. They remember the hut, the skulls, and the witch, but forget that Vasilisa survives by listening, working, waiting, and carrying inherited care into danger. That is why the tale should stay a little unresolved. Baba Yaga is not only evil, Vasilisa is not only innocent, and the forest is not only danger. The story's power comes from holding those truths together. That is what makes Vasilisa useful for a modern audience. She is not only a princess or a victim. She is a survivor who learns to read the world correctly before it can swallow her. The tale remains vivid because every element carries meaning. The doll, the cabin, the fire, the forest, and the witch become symbols that stay with the listener long after the story ends. That memory is why the story keeps showing up in illustration, theater, and film. It gives creators a set of symbols that can be adapted without losing the tale's core emotional charge. At its heart, the story says that guidance can come from the smallest places. A doll, a habit, a memory, or a fragment of a mother's care can become enough to carry someone through darkness. And that is why the ending feels earned. Vasilisa does not escape because the world becomes kind. She escapes because she becomes capable of navigating a world that was never kind to begin with. The story's power comes from that honesty. It recognizes fear, but it also recognizes instruction, memory, and the long reach of inherited strength. Taken together, these elements explain the tale's lasting power. It is familiar enough to feel intimate, strange enough to remain unsettling, and rich enough to carry its emotional truth across generations. Vasilisa survives because the tale turns fear into instruction. The forest remains dangerous, but memory, discipline, and inherited care give her a way through it.